Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As Joseph said, my name is Roger Palmer, and thanks so much for sticking around until the end. Yeah, it's wonderful. Quickly, I'd just like to thank the organising committee, Dr. Joseph Haldane, and of course the conference co-chairs, Professor Steve Cornwall and Professor Barbara Lockie, who spelt Barabara Lockie in the program, but she's not here, so she won't be angry. I was delighted to hear from Dr. Ali earlier talking about textbooks, because it's something dear to my heart as a textbook author. And it's always very interesting to hear. Okay. Today, I'm going to have a look at this question of building knowledge. Okay? Building knowledge. Okay? So let's take a look at... Okay. What do you think? Is teaching an art or a science? What do you say? We've got a both? We've got a... You're being clever, come on.
No, it's both.
It's both. It's an art and it's a science, yeah? So, yeah, there are many ideas about this. People much smarter than me have said a lot about it. Oh, it is working. So Ken Robinson, in his very popular TED Talk, of course, said that when do we start comparing what we do to FedEx? Yeah. So, yeah, of course it can be both. Sometimes I get the feeling that we knock the teaching profession. Yeah. So it's very popular to get up on TED Talks and say teachers this and teachers that, but actually it's a very difficult job, and people are doing the best they can. Yeah. Right. As you know, it's customary to have 3 points, so I won't disappoint you. Yeah? We'll look at teaching language learners up to their potential and the needs of second language learners, so looking at texts in their social contexts and the use of technology. You can see that I'm trying to bring the broad themes together here. I'm trying to, yeah? The idea of language learning and the use of technology. Yeah? And it's very interesting, the famous British sociologist of education, Basil Bernstein, going back several decades, in his work on class, code, and control. Of course, the English always write about class. You know, we're fascinated with this idea. But he did show a correlation, a direct correlation, between social class and language. So it's very important, this access to education. Okay. So this is an example from the German department at Georgetown University, Professor Heidi Byrnes, someone I very much admire. And the funny thing is, if you go to the English website at Georgetown, it's nothing like this at all. It's all about learning skills and all of the stuff that's been going for years and years and years. But what Heidi Byrnes and her colleagues worked on was about oral and written textual genres in their undergraduate program and multiple literacies. And this is a big theme, the idea of combining the literacies. And you'll see that very big programs, for example, the Kanda program in Japan, which is huge, has gone over to multiple literacies. My program, content and language integrated learning. Okay. Ours is very small, by the way, but nothing like theirs. Okay. And there used to be this idea that you'd teach your students up to a certain level and then you'd send them overseas. Well, why don't we teach learners up to their potential, whatever their potential is, in our own context? For example, this is a starter level for German learners in Germany learning English. But even at the starter level, you'll see they're looking at scientific experiments. Yeah? Observation, excuse my German, Beobachtung, questions, Frage, hypothesis, Annahme. It goes through the stages. It's a staged activity. So even at the very basic level, it's something we can do, which impressed me. Okay, and Professor Claire Cramch, who I believe will be coming to the JOUT conference this year. Good opportunity. That's in November?
November 21st through...
See you there. Okay, very excited. She asked some time ago, what is language? Okay, and she said, is the idea of learning a language to emulate the native speaker, to be just like them? Obviously not, but it does help if you do have this cultural knowledge that Dr. Ali referred to. Otherwise, like, my jokes wouldn't be funny. Oh, they're not funny anyway. But, you know, if you can't get the hang of what it's about, right? So, of course, language has traditionally been seen as, you know, being owned by certain people. But, of course, it's a social and cultural practice, even amongst, especially amongst the English speakers, the native English speakers. We can't agree on what proper language is. You know, people be like, right. Yeah, whatever. Yeah. So, and her paper, "The Privilege of the Non-Native Speaker," isn't that an interesting title? Non-native speakers have great advantages, of course. Okay. Now, these are the kinds of students I have in Japan, and we gave them, you know, a simple writing task. And, you know, these are the things they struggle with before they've had any instruction. They've been through junior high school and high school, but, you know, dear my pen friend, hi, how are you? I'm fine. Okay? So, you know, you get this kind of stuff. I talk when it should be, there's no setting, there's no past tenses, etc., etc. There's no appraisal at the end. There's no temporal adverbs. And what is even more interesting, my students hate using adjectives. It's almost like they're being punished if they have to use an adjective. Yeah? They absolutely despise using adjectives. So, you know, it has to be taught. I believe specifically, explicitly, and it's always interesting to see. Now, you know, this is nothing new, but of course, Leibov back in '72 was already identifying what goes into particular genres of discourse. And he analysed narrative, of course, for his own research. But he already said, oh, wow, it's a staged activity. There are particular stages. Once you've identified them, you can teach them. Once you've taught them, people can join your target language community. They're not excluded anymore. So this was good stuff. I've used some of these ideas in a course I teach called American Studies. Apologies to any of the Americans out there. Right. And Beverly Derewienka in Australia, this is a great pamphlet. It's actually quite old now, but she did this, I think, for the Women's Reading Association in the UK. It's only about 45 pages, clear examples. So, hold on, I'll try and use the wonders of technology here, my red pen. So we've got text structure over here. We've got language features over here. Orientation, record of events, time phrases under language, participants, past tenses, mental verbs, observed, noticed, action verbs, dug, planted. Oh, they're different. So, you know, to some of you, I mean, I know this is obvious, but to other people who are not familiar with this, it has to be taught. Once it's taught, then you can grasp it, right? So there's the text structure. You need to know what's going on in terms of the stages, and you need to know which language features are used. So, of course, it's in the past tense. It doesn't jump around in English. Now, languages vary, but in English it doesn't jump. It sticks in the past, okay? Here are some of my students. In fact, the student on the left came to see me the other day. He's not in my class anymore. And I was just saying to him, oh, I've got a picture of you. And he was like, oh, wow, that was a year ago. And here they go, the 3 pigs. You know the story of the 3 little pigs. The big bad wolf comes to the little pig's house and he goes, little pig, let me come in. No, Woo! So it says the little pig, not by the hair of my chinny chin chin. Am I on camera? So he always says, I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow the house down. Okay, so yeah. And of course, there is a structure to it. Beginning, what goes on, who, what, where, when. Problem, there's always a problem in a narrative. Something goes wrong. There's always a series of events and it's resolved. Happy ending or sad ending. The one I learned, Ladybird, when I was a child, 2 of the pigs got eaten up, but the last one boiled the fox. The wolf. These days, they all become friends, and it's all kind of politically correct. But anyway, you can tell my age here. But anyway, it's got this stuff in, right? And then the language, once upon a time, has to be taught. All this stuff has to be taught, right? And what can you do? Well, you can give a framework, a template. This is what is expected. Background knowledge. This is what we want you to produce. Then you construct it together as a class, joint construction. Then you do it yourself. Staged activity. And we saw great progress amongst our Japanese students with this. Really incredible from year to year. They couldn't do it one year, the next year they could do it. I had the bottom class, number 10. Amazing, yeah. I'm not going to go on about this. We saw amazing development, okay? And this is a historical biography. Jackie Robinson, a great choice of topic. My students chose their own topics. The first, I think, black.
African American in the Major League.
Right. Which, you know, I like your one with Imran Khan, the cricketer earlier. I could relate to that. You know, I'm not so good on baseball, but you know, I've labelled it here what he did. We've got the orientation, the record of events, the evaluation. He's used who, where, when. He's used time links. He's used in, in, and he's got an appraisal. What hasn't he used? Adjectives, temporal adverbs, spelling's a bit wonky, and uses was too much. The use of verbs, not so many mental verbs, action verbs. But, you know, whatever. He's a beginning learner. He's doing his best. Okay? And there they are, sharing their knowledge in class. We all do this in class. And pictures, no problem. Make it multimodal. I'm very happy to see pictures and share what you've done. And then you get through to students giving poster presentations. She's very good. She wasn't in my class. I'll just show you a little bit of what she's doing. But please notice when you see her poster in a sec that she's got, what she did very well is she's got rhetorical questions and she's got a graph with her data and she's got famous quotations. And so not only has she talked about her topic in the United States, but she's illustrated it in a very organized way, actually a lot better than some of my colleagues have done in their poster presentations. I'm shocking at poster presentations myself. Anyway.
What is the cohabitation article?
My camera works, sorry.
This time, American government composed a high party and a low party. It's called joining kaigi in Japan. And this time, kaigi is strong. So this time, reason question, this suggestion is rejected, but reason most disagree start.
Okay, so as you can see, that's an incoming student. But I mean, the organization of what she's doing, bringing everything together, the oral genre of getting the message out, there's the communicative act, bringing these things together, the culminating activity. She did a very nice job. Now, I joked earlier about being a textbook author. This book is now being published. It's a Ministry of Education approved senior high school textbook in Japan. I'm just the guy that kind of checks some of the stuff. If you look at the bottom, at number 1, choose the things related to Japanese people. We've got heart disease, diet rich in fat, negative, Vitamin C, positive. Daily exercise, positive. Driving a car, soy products. Choose the things related to the US. Any comments? A lot of killers. Only 1 million deaths from a heart attack. Lazy lifestyle. D, healthy food. That's the token one. And E, overweight. And when I questioned them on this, they said, but we read this online, it must be true. Well, I'm not disputing that. I'm saying, like, your choice of what goes in is very important. We changed it a little bit. A little bit. Okay. Now, this is research in Heidi Byrnes, again, chapter 10, Alice Caffarel. She analysed a Le Monde news article about the Afghan war. I'm not picking on her as a French speaker, it's just an illustration. But you can see that, for example, when the bombings take place, the agent, it is vague de bombardement, which is just an impersonal bombing. Nobody does it. And then we have at the bottom, les Talibans. We've got the Taliban. We've got terrorism, all this stuff. It sends a message. Okay? Now, students were asked to comment on this. And they said, well, when I looked at this, it's very much us and them. Okay? So if you use these kinds of words to describe it, and when it's us, bombing just takes place, and when it's them, you place Muslims and terrorists in one section, it sends a message. And you can draw your own conclusions. But this is what we do with language. Language is not neutral. Your selection is very important. So it serves to distance the reader from the reality of the events. It's very interesting. So, moving on to the second point, I'm going to look at texts because they always exist in context. Now, for American studies, we had this one, very similar to what Dr. Ali mentioned earlier. You've got the passage, very basic, and you've got vocab comprehension. Nothing new there. So I analysed it. Sorry, I can't even speak. I analysed it. What we tend to do is that we describe texts in a formal sense. So, for example, and this has been analysed by Suzanne Eggins, amongst others, is that we say, okay, here's a text. It's got a paragraph. It's got a sentence. It's got words. It doesn't tell you a lot. It's a formal description. Now, if I say beginning, middle, end, you could say, well, my life has a beginning, middle, and an end, whenever it may happen. Everything has a beginning, middle, and an end. Yeah? But, you know, a lab report has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Yeah? A story, an academic essay, it's a formal description. It doesn't give you a lot. So here we go, discourse analysis. This is Van Ostrom. What is this? How do you know?
There's a structure.
There's
format it follows.
Very good. I agree.
And I mean, that's ingrained. That's the template you have.
That is the genre. And you always have the title. You always have the materials. It's a how-to. It's a procedure. And you have, what are the verb forms? Imperatives. Exactly. And so this particular text has to be taught to students. A different text has its own rules, has to be taught in a different way. It's not just all writing, it's a particular kind. And this is what goes into, this is, you know, a functional analysis of texts. This is what goes into them. They generally have a title, an enticement, this delicious, I always fall for that. My cooking's terrible. But I always fall for this, and then I think it's going to be great. And my daughter's a picky eater, and she was going like this. But anyway, and then we've got the ingredients, numbers, measuring words. And then we've got a method in order, imperatives. is what you have to do. And of course, serving quantity. Serves 4, and you hope everyone will enjoy it when you've finished it. Okay? So the language is organized and the text is organized. Now, if that were a story, I'd have to give the different structure of the story and the different language, which is kind of obvious, right? And we've got the beautiful Sarah Palin up here for any Americans in here. And couldn't resist that one. And I'm not going to wink. That's kind of an in-joke. She always winks when she's giving a speech. So, so as Higgins discusses, what are the variables going into text? Well, of course, there are a huge number, but 3 main ones that we'll look at. The mode, the role of the language, okay? So we don't use language the same way in speaking as we do in writing, yeah? Now, I'm talking about English here. I can't speak about every language. Would that be true in other languages? Written language and spoken language, do they change? A little bit, okay. So in English, that would be true. And then role relations of power and solidarity. You mentioned gender and other aspects before. We don't use language in the same way to talk to our boss as we do to talk to our lover, okay? It would cause problems. Well, you can imagine. Right, and field, I don't talk about linguistics in the same way as I talk about jogging, right? Yeah, it would be kind of strange, you know. If I said I'm just going off to, for a run along the river, along that zone of proximal development, wherever I'm going, whatever it happens to be, right? So, if I look at that text I showed you before, how do I break it down? Well, normally for our students, I show them 3 kinds of meaning, okay? The 3 meanings based on those 3 modes, okay? So, let's take a look. First is the ideational meaning. Now, ideational meaning is the field where it takes place. And this particular reading was about the railroad in the United States, how it connected the East Coast and the West Coast. So obviously, if your students are new to something like American Studies, you have to explain to them that East and West does not mean like the Cold War, does not mean their own country. It's referring to something specific. And we would show them a video, get them interested so that they know what's going on, before we do it. And this is very much the real world meaning. Now, most textbooks, and we've seen many good examples today, just deal with that meaning, comprehension questions. Now, when we get on to interpersonal meaning that you discussed earlier, well, what's going on here? What is the writer's relationship to what they're writing? Because they're communicating with us through their text. So, this writer is trying to convince us using the voice of authority. The first settlers in the United States lived mainly on the East Coast. We believe them. This is written as fact. We believe them. The government gave prizes. Sounds great. The government comes across as warm and caring. We all know that our governments are warm and caring. Yeah? Okay? The work was hard and dangerous. They hired Chinese workers. The Chinese worked harder than the other workers. Is that true? How do we know that? The Chinese worked harder. They hired Chinese workers. At the end, a triumphant tone. When the railroads came together, it was a very important moment. There were celebrations. Did those Chinese workers celebrate? No, they were dead. They died building the railroad. Who got the money from the railroad? The railroad owners. Nothing changes. So, we have to be very careful. If students don't go through at this level, they will miss this and just believe that this is all okay. It's not okay. Well, you might think it's okay if you're a railroad owner, but otherwise, might not. And then, of course, the language, the textual meaning, Mode, spoken or written. So we've got it in very, very passive type, matter-of-factly. The government decided. The two companies met. The government gave prizes. Yeah? It's organized as it's very matter-of-fact. So we tend to believe it. It's the voice of authority. The text uses particular verb forms to get that across. Now, reference chains. These are fun. So what do we have? Participants. For example, people are in texts. Here, well, what kind of people? The first settlers. They're in there. Many more people. People. The people. People. Wow, there's a lot. Now, students really enjoy doing this themselves. So give them something to do. I gave them a few to do. I said, okay, find company, find railroad, find east-west, count how many you find. Yeah? They go through and they start becoming very familiar with the text. If you say to them, read it, they don't want to read it. If you say, go through and count, oh, yeah, I can do that. And then, how many did you find? I found 9. No, there's more. Huh? Go back in. Yeah? So get them involved at that level. So these are the reference chains. There's another thread going through, well, there are several, which is lexis. So, now, if you say, I'm going to teach you vocabulary language, or I don't want to do that. Okay, here's a game. Go through and find words connected with land. Settlers, people, yeah. Lived, that's to do with land. Coast, well, that's to do with land. Used horses, why? To travel across the land. Traveling on the land, complete the land journey, arrive at their land destination, transport infrastructure, land. Just land is so full of references. Okay? So the students are getting deeper into the text. Now, I do this for mine. Obviously, you'd have to do it for your own particular contexts. So do it for quantities and numbers. By 1860, 3,000 miles, 2 months, 2 companies, 1 company, the 2 companies for every... Wow, there's a lot. Okay? So you get through all of these, and you find there's a lot in there. Challenges, a long way. They never arrived. A difficult job, hard and dangerous. Okay? All of these are in there, but are often overlooked. I'm not saying you overlook them. I'm talking about, in my teaching context, many of my colleagues, we were discussing this, they just say, here's a reading passage, finish, comprehension, next one. No, no, no. It just doesn't get them deeply engaged with what they learn. Okay? And then, yeah, what's the social purpose, the genre? Well, this is a historical account. But is it true? Yeah, this is the question. Did it really happen that way? The writer says it did, but how do we know that? How do we verify that? Yeah? We need to reflect on what's in there. They talk about the background and the sequence going through, but can we trust them? Okay, so yeah, what's the social purpose? Tell us about America. The audience, my students, and here's the phases it goes through. You can see the stages, and at the end, a deduction. Yeah, so the writer has a deduction, but it's slightly different from my deduction, right? But I don't care if the students agree with me or not. In fact, if they disagree, it's much better that they've got their own view, that it's their text, that they can break it down. Okay? And Suzanne Eggins comes up with this brilliant example here. Let's attack the Reds. What does it mean for you? Ask somebody. What does that mean?
Communists.
Okay, communists.
Indians.
Yeah.
Indians. Okay.
Down with Liverpool.
Down with Liverpool.
Manchester.
Do you know what she had in mind?
Red blood cells.
Red blood cells. Whoa, very clever.
Red light.
Let's attack the red lights.
red shirt.
Well, you see, in this textbook I referred to earlier, they keep putting in grammatical sentences, and then they wonder why I keep crossing them out and saying, I don't know what it means because I don't know the context. I have no idea. Well, she discussed a fight, like you did. Most of you said fighting. I'm sure you're going to say fighting. And then games. You can attack the other side in a game, like Liverpool. This is actually social drinking. Let's have some red wine. Cultural reference. Yeah? Let's attack the reds. Not the white wine. Let's drink the red wine. I'm sorry if you're from a country where you don't drink. Yeah, so it's a cultural reference. Let's drink the red wine, not the white wine. Or the rosé, or whatever else you indulge. Yeah? So let's attack the reds was from this social situation. Yeah? So that's the idea of context, text and context. So it really is a key idea. Professor, Dr. Emi Amelia in Indonesia, who I've been doing research with, she's an expert on SFL, but also critical literacy. And so I adapted some of these questions from her own research. But so depending on the level of my students and how much I've taught them before, I might ask them, what's the topic? Why are they writing? But then I might go deeper. What's their opinion? Okay? And if you agree, why do you agree? If this opinion annoys you, why does it annoy you? How does it annoy you? You know, choose a phrase. Is it hyperbole? Is it irony? We're getting into deeper, more advanced levels. And at the end, you're a text critic. So now you own it. You're going to criticize it and break it down. You are the critic. You're in charge of it. That's an empowerment thing. And my project, I'm very lucky I can teach projects. My project this semester is European cinema, and my students have to write critical reviews. So that is the aim, to choose an area of European film, become an expert in it, an authority, if you like, be an authority, and write critical reviews. So I teach them how to write reviews. So it's a limited term project, but it's focused that way. Okay. And back to my favorite one here. And you can see critical questions go in, and too small to read. But anyway, I then use the critical questions for this text. I can skip that one. And these wordles, you've seen them before, right? Yeah? But aren't they interesting? That tells you about power too. What are the bigger words? What's the idea of the bigger words?
The more frequency, you're more.
Frequency. They're in there more. Companies. Wow, that's a big word. Authority is with the companies. Yeah? People, smaller than companies. Yeah? So very interesting to see how words get in there and how often they come up. Okay? So we do not teach skills in isolation. We don't do it. We use a multiple literacies approach, and we have students engage and break down text to build knowledge. So we don't follow language acquisition. You mentioned Dr. Krashen earlier. We don't follow those ideas so much. We're much more on the idea of building up knowledge. Why? They've had another approach before in schools, so we're trying to give them another look. Okay. And to round off the conference, I was asked to talk about technology a little bit, because I did a project with Dr. Amelia, iPads, yeah, and, yeah, iPads and what we can do with them. And, you know, iPads are sort of funny, because you can do this, you can do this, you can do funny things with them. But, yeah, all this technology is making us antisocial. Yes. Well, yeah, and that's what they said with Gutenberg's printing press, with the pencil. Whatever, everything makes us antisocial, whatever, you know. But, you know, it's not the fault of this, you know. I'm trying to be social, I'm holding this, but, you know, I'm trying to be social. And what I love about it is I can pass it around in class. And people can touch the pens and do all this stuff themselves, you know, so it's kind of fun. Right. I don't think technology makes us antisocial. Not technology for its own sake, but it's been around a while, hundreds of years, and it will continue. Yeah, so we all use it. Anyone interested in the theoretical background? For example, Günter Kress and others, it's social semiotics, the theory that deals with meaning. So I've talked about the three meanings in the texts, but the theory behind a lot of this would be social semiotics. So you've got Van Leeuwen, you've got Günter Kress, etc. And the iPad's great because, like anything else, it shapes your identity. The fact that I'm going through this allows me to do certain things. Through the iPad, I can talk to my computer over there, and I can draw on here, and I can stand beside here and avoid the light and all that kind of stuff. But by virtue of using the iPad, I cannot type well. That's a design decision. It's not intended as a typing format. It's moved beyond that, so it shapes your identity. Okay? So the media you use has an effect on actually on how you work, which is interesting. And I mentioned in the title about producing knowledge. Yes, we produce knowledge and disseminate it. We participate. Someone sends me a link. I go online or I fiddle around with it. I change a photo, edit it, send it back, post it. We create knowledge. It's not just out there. We are co-creators of knowledge. We're sharing and collaborating. And some people say, technology is just a tool. I don't agree. If I'm socially networked with someone in another country, if, for example, in Pakistan, students have access to education, Open University, who didn't have it before, that's not just a tool, that's a revolution in their lives. It's much more than just a tool, okay? It can be a tool, but social networks, new collaborative spaces, are not tools. They're new forms of communication collaboration, okay? So I don't agree with this idea that technology is just a tool. And here you go. These are children, okay? When they're very young, what do? They learn socially. Look at the shopping lists. A 3-year-old made a shopping list, yeah? They can do that. They doodle a birthday list. Mum, my dad and me on the swings, okay? My dad and me on the swings. And I lost my Wi-Fi connection, so I'm going to bash my... sorry. That's the wonders of technology. So, yeah, the idea being that when you go around, you can actually get your, the idea of a letter with the kind of frilly paperwork that you get in the letter, and then birthday list over here, and these are children entering first grade. So, if you take something like an iPad, it has what we call affordances, things you can do with it and things you can't do with it. So that's the idea of social semiotics. So it doesn't open and close like a PC. You can pass it around. Yeah, you can pass it around to people. They can use it with you. There's no buttons. And what are the design implications of technology? This kind of hardware. Not talk about apps, talk about the hardware. Well, it foregrounds the visual. So you can see my slides tend to be kind of more visual using this. And other behavior, emailing, is put in the background, which is wonderful because emailing takes up so much of our time. So you get it out of your life. Yeah? So you say, I'll communicate with you in real time. No emails, thank you. Okay? And typing? No. What do my students do? They don't type, they cut and paste. Copy, cut and whatever. So, yeah, they're so happy with that. And here's my students in class using all manner of different devices. We found that tablets work best just because you can pass them around, and if you're in a small group, you can show people what you're doing. And I used to worry about students coming up to the front of the class and fiddling with my computer. Since I had an iPad, I've become less possessive. It's funny, isn't it? It's changed my behavior. I say, oh, here you go, whatever. Yeah? So they share them around. And my colleague in Indonesia doing it found the same thing. And this is what I worked with another teacher in a language school in Indonesia. She used her iPad as an interactive whiteboard. So she projected this up here. All she had was the iPad and a simple projector and not a proper board. And the students wrote up there on it. It's good, isn't it? Who needs an interactive whiteboard? You've got this. Peer editing. Go up to the board and edit on the board. Yeah? Simple, effective. Joint construction. Before you do a polished essay, you work on it together. Frame. Student adds something. Student adds something more. And student finishes off and teacher comments. iPad, projector, wall, done. Okay? Wonderful thing about technology. So yes, it can get in the way, but it can open up possibilities for children in Indonesia that they've never had before. And when they get the answers right, the teacher lets them play Angry Birds. Yeah? So there are some implications for enhancing language performance, which is that it changes your behavior. More on accessing information, capturing it, editing it, creating knowledge. It changes how you do it. Not how to get things done. You select and do it. So a change in generations. And so in conclusion, I think as a teacher, I want to have a commitment. I will try and teach my students their potential, not just abandon them and say, go overseas and study. Yeah, this is kind of a commitment with them. I want them to learn to break down texts, own them, and be the person that really understands them, not just comprehension questions, not just one level. Really, really grasp texts and their social context. And it's easy to knock technology, but it can be your friend. You know, all these things. Nothing works perfectly. I don't work perfectly, but you know, they can help us and do a good job. Thank you for your kind attention.